Welcome, everybody, to Spirituality Adventures. This is a non-judgmental place to explore spirituality, and we're so glad you're here. This is a viewer and listener-supported podcast, so we greatly appreciate your support. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Be sure and like, share, and subscribe to any of the social media content platforms that you're using. And then if you go to our website, spiritualityadventures.com, you can make a one-time donation, or with a monthly subscription, you'll gain access to our bonus content. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in. All right, welcome everybody to Spirituality Adventures. We're glad you're tuning in for this episode. And today I've got Schandorff. Gene and I are actually meeting for the first time doing this Zoom interview, but I'll give you a quick backstory of how this came about. I've been going to the NAI basketball tournament in Kansas City since the 60s with my dad, who played NAI basketball. My nephew ended up playing basketball, followed here. He played basketball at Mid-America Nazarene University, and he was All-American 4 years. They won a national championship under him and were runners up 1 year as well under him, Danny Hawkins. And he's in the Basketball Hall of Fame at Mid-America Nazarene University now. And his coach was Rocky Lamar, and Rocky is one of the top winning basketball coaches in all of America basketball history. I think he's won maybe over 800 games. It puts him in a rare elite category. So Rocky Lamar was Danny Hawkins' coach, some friends all through these years. And usually Rocky and his wife Jo sit with us at the NAI tournament when they're there. Danny's there, and I had recently, maybe 2 months, an interview with my favorite new theologian, which is a guy named Thomas J. Ord, Dr. Ord, Tom Ord. And I asked Rocky, I said, hey, Rocky, are you a theologian or just a basketball coach? I was just kind of playing with him. And well, my dad was a pastor, and my wife here, he turned me over to Jo immediately, and I asked Jo the same question, if she knew Tom Ward, and she said, well, my brother knows him really well. And I said, oh, tell me about your brother-in-law. Well, it turns out she told me about a guy who was a chaplain and a pastor and a cyclist and Tom Ward, and knew Tom. And so then I was like, oh, well, if you put Tom and cycling together, I thought, well, I got to do an interview with this guy. That's literally how it happened. And I said, can you give me his cell phone? And I got your cell phone, texted you, and you were gracious to jump on here, Gene. Thank you so much. Welcome to Spirituality Adventures.
Good to be here.
Yeah. So let's start just by what's your background, your origin story. Where were you born? Where'd you grow up? How'd you get into pastoring and chaplain and, being a chaplain, all that stuff?
Yeah. Born in Medford, Oregon, moved against my will at the age of 6 months. I was raised in Pasadena, California. My dad passed away just before I was born. And so mom raised my sister and I as a single mom. She was on the faculty at Pasadena College, which is now Point Loma Nazarene University. So I was a campus brat. Been a part of the Church of the Nazarene my whole life. I think the first 2 weeks I missed was the week after I was born. I'd been there the whole 9 months before that, and was back in church at about 3 weeks. So that was my background. Raised in a very healthy church. Kids and youth ministry, and so I that's the Nazarene Church kid story is kind of my story. I was saved at summer camp about 9 years in a row. Um, and uh, went to Pasadena College, Nazarene College, not really knowing what I wanted to do or major in, but mom was on the faculty, so it was free. So you go, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh,
one of my first classes was a class taught by a gentleman by the name of Paul Culbertson. Turned out to be a psych class. And after about a week, I decided I was going to major in whatever this old guy was teaching,
mm,
and because he was that engaging.
mm, mm.
So I did an undergraduate degree in psych. And about halfway through college, I sensed a call to ministry. Stayed in my psych major and then went to seminary in Kansas City,
Yeah,
where I learned about barbecue.
of course. Yeah. So,
And
what's the name of the seminary here in Kansas City?
it's Nazarene Theological Seminary.
Yeah, it's one of the seminaries, right?
Pardon me?
One of the top Nazarene seminaries.
I, really, it's the only Nazarene seminary in the U.S. We
Okay.
have some international campuses, but
Yeah.
it's the only one in the U.S. Our colleges are more offering graduate degrees as well.
Right. But yeah, seminary only. Um, what years were you there in
I was
Kansas?
in seminary in 72 and 71 to 73.
Okay. Interesting. Let me back up on you just a minute.
Yeah.
Did you say that Pasadena College is now Point Loma?
Yeah.
I I must be I thought Point Loma was San Diego.
Yeah, it is. It is. The college moved in 73, right
Okay.
after I graduated.
Okay.
Moved from Pasadena, got a heck of a deal on a ocean campus,
Okay.
and moved to San Diego in 73.
I I've never been to that campus in San Diego, but I've been told it's one of the most beautiful campuses in America.
That's entirely possible. It really is spectacular.
And I have a cousin that has been a full-time maintenance guy at Point Loma school there decades now.
Hmm.
Yeah, one of my first cousins
Yeah.
on maintenance staff there for decades. So
Well, their campus does most of their recruiting for them.
okay,
It's a beautiful spot.
he loved it. He loves working for the school. Yeah. Well, cool. So then back to Kansas City. Yeah, you went to seminary 72, 73. I'm curious a little bit. There's new Asbury revival thing going on
Yeah.
now, and it kind of is similar to I know there was an Asbury thing that went on in the 70s that was similar.
Yeah, I was on campus in Pasadena when that happened, about 69, I think.
Okay, I couldn't.
We were a part of, we got swept up in that like a lot of other schools did.
Yeah.
We actually, I think Asbury sent ambassadors out across the country, and we had some Asbury students speak in our chapel. And
Right. Well, what made me think of it was a professor at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary named Jack Gray, and Jack during that Asbury revival had become friends with some of the leaders in that, and some of the professors at your seminary were a part of that as well.
mm-hmm.
And they happen to be friends with Jack Gray. Jack was my spiritual formations teacher at Southwestern, and he was always wanting me to meet his Nazarene seminary professor friends, mm-hmm. and I never did. So and I can't even bring up their names, or it just made me think of that because those were fond memories of his, interesting. Yeah. So you were at seminary. Did you get a divinity?
Actually, I didn't graduate from seminary. I got an opportunity to go work with a pastor in Southern California who I believed would be a really significant mentor to me, and it turned out that was true. So right after my wife and I got married, we moved to Anaheim, and I worked on staff there for 4 years and finished my master's at Point Loma.
Okay. What was the name of the church in Anaheim?
Anaheim First Nazarene.
Okay. Um, um, did you meet wife at seminary?
Yeah, well, she was at Mid America Nazarene College at the time, and
Oh, nice.
blind date.
Nice.
Single seminary guy, good looking college girl.
Right. What church did you go to when you're in Kansas City?
You know, it's interesting, particularly in light of what you're doing right now. I served for 2 years as youth pastor at Broadview Christian Church, the
Oh,
Disciples of Christ Church in Raytown,
interesting.
which
Yeah.
I understand now is New Vision Christian Church.
Okay.
Um, I did a little Googling yesterday to find out uh, what they were up to, and it's a predominantly African American church now, down Blue Ridge Parkway.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I was ordained Southern Baptist almost 30 years as a vineyard pastor. And then now I'm newly like 2 months Disciples of Christ pastor. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
That was quite a change for this Nazarene boy,
Yeah.
but it was good. It was a positive time.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. Probably a little more progressive than the Nazarene church.
Yeah, everything but the little part. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Everything but the little part. Their manual of discipline wasn't quite so thick, probably, right?
right, right. Yeah, and I was, you know, I had to process this radical idea of communion every Sunday.
Ah, well, I'm doing that for the first time.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep. Yep. So, well, what's the non-negotiables that I can't change, or like Lord
yeah,
Prayer every Sunday, communion every Sunday. It's like
yeah, yeah. We'll go with it.
I can do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm currently in a Nazarene church that does that as well every Sunday.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I mean, when I was Baptist, maybe once a quarter,
Right. That's what I grew up on, once a quarter.
We didn't do it that much, but at my vineyard church, we did it once a month.
Yeah.
But yeah. So Anaheim, you go from Anaheim. How many kids do you have, by the way?
We have two. They're both grown adults. We have six kids. Our oldest grandkid is 23 and our youngest is 13.
Awesome.
So we're not cool anymore.
Right. But you probably are if you ride your bike.
Some, yeah.
All right. It's hard. Yeah. Anyway, we'll talk about cycling here in a minute. But so, where'd you go from Anaheim?
Um, I really felt the desire to preach. I was with a pastor who was an excellent preacher, and I was not going to get to preach in that environment. That's a very positive thing. I'm not being critical at all of him. I took a church in Long Beach. From there, I was there for 5 years. And then we moved to Humboldt County, California, Northern California. I was there for 10 years, and our church was right across the street from Humboldt State University. And I got absolutely captivated and captured by ministry to college students. And after 10 years there, I accepted as chaplain at Northwest Nazarene University. And I was chaplain at the university for 23 years.
Wow. Wow. That's awesome. And
that's the professional journey.
North Green is that in Boise?
Nampa, just outside of Boise.
Okay. Excellent. Ah, great for you. College chaplaincy. That keeps you young.
Evidently, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Idaho's such a beautiful state. I had never realized that. And there was a friend of mine who actually came to Jesus during the Jesus movement out in California. Dad was the principal of Hollywood High School where Richard Dreyfuss went and all that, and came to Christ in the Jesus movement. Ended up planting a vineyard church in Boise, Idaho. A guy named Troy Robinson, and it was grew to be a
Yeah.
really good solid influential there in Boise. Try found out that I was a backpacker and a fly fisherman. He said, "Man, you need to come to Idaho." This is years ago. So he had horsebacked and fly fished every lake in the Sawtooth.
Mm.
Crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
So he knew the Sawtooths well, and I hike instead of horse, but he mapped out, some stuff for us, me and my buddy, and we were a couple of times backpack, fly fish, cutthroat, you know, and then I've done rock climbing in Idaho down the southern part. Elephant Rock, is it called that rock? There's a rock
Uh, I'm
that
not familiar with that, but there's several climbing spots down here.
yeah, one of them has a famous rock that actually looks it's a natural, but it looks like an elephant.
Oh,
I've climbed that and done 100-mile bicycle gravel competitions in the Sawtooth.
right. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I fished up in northern Idaho and the St. Mary's and Coeur d'Alene.
yeah, yeah.
So it's a beautiful state. I never realized how beautiful Idaho was. But yeah, love that part of the world. So tell one of the things that I found fascinating was cycling story, because Joe Lamar was telling me about your cycling. So how did you get into cycling?
My wife and I both owned bikes and rode a little. And when I was in my mid 30s, I thought I hadn't been on my bike in a while, and I needed to go out and do it again. And I rode about a half an hour and nearly died and realized I was in terrible condition. So I started riding again at that point, and riding with a little more seriousness, and really we've been pretty much on the road bikes ever since. We don't do the off-road mountain bike stuff. We're pretty much road now, trail bikes, rail trail bikes, and that kind of thing. But and then in 2017, I got talked into joining a group on a coast to coast ride, which was always a dream. I always wanted to do it, but I felt like I'd waited too long. I guess I was 68 at the time, and I thought that was too old. And it turns out it wasn't.
Good job.
And so we've been.
I'm Sue, and I'm still riding. So
Yeah,
yeah, I that's the thing I like about cycling is you can age with it.
yeah, yeah. We haven't gone the electric bike route yet.
Yeah, neither have I.
That might be in the future.
I have friends that, what's interesting. I went out. I took uh, last summer. One of my sisters who does a lot of RV camping with friends. They RV camped up in Breckenridge area for the first time in the high Rockies, and so I love that area. I go there quite often. I decided to meet them out there, and I kind of camped and under the stars while they were in their RVs. But they decided they wanted to rent electric bikes one day, and I just rode my gravel bike, but I probably took them on a 25-mile ride. They had a blast. They kicked my butt going up the big mountains, right?
Sure.
And loved it. And that's a like they could have never ridden a regular. They would have died after 20 minutes on a regular bike. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's really benefits to bikes, I
Oh
think.
yeah. Yeah. I don't have any. I no ill will toward electric bike riders. There have been a couple of situations that I've been a little frustrated. When I see an 18-year-old going 25 miles an hour on a bike trail, that's a little frustrating.
Right.
But on an electric bike,
Yeah, yeah.
but I sure get. I mean, those bikes have put several friends our age back on the trail
Right.
who wouldn't be riding otherwise, and I think that's wonderful.
I do too.
So,
I'm going to hold off as long as I can.
yeah, that's kind of where we are.
I will probably eventually be there. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Um, so I'm curious, like what kind of bikes do you ride?
Well,
I know this is getting in a little geeky for bike, but I have listened to my podcast, so
yeah, yeah. No, we're
a whole interview.
I I ascribe to that mathematical formula of the appropriate number of bikes that a person should own, which is n plus one. Um, so we each have a road bike. We each have a kind of a hybrid, upright handlebars, a little bit wider tires, sort of a gravel bike, but cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we have a recumbent tandem
Mm.
that we love to ride.
Mm.
Uh, and then we have a couple of cruisers, and I think the inventory in the garage is down to about 11 right now.
Right. Yeah. I I I have that I ride. I probably have five in my garage, but I have three that I run. One's an Orbea road bike, full carbon. One's Salsa Warbird gravel, full carbon. And then my mountain bike is a Cannondale Lefty full carbon.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So they're all nice bikes. I used to have a Ford Ranger, and I'd put my two of my bikes back of my Ford Ranger, and if I crashed and totaled everything, I'd get more money for my bikes than my truck.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I remember one I used to crit race. I don't crit race anymore, but I still do gravel and mountain bike races, but I used to do crits, for money kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
I remember I bought a set of full carbon race wheels. I mean, just the wheels are almost $2,000. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
But I'd have people at church, ask me like, well, how much did you pay for your bike? You probably what did you pay? $300 or $400? Like I'm going, yeah, little bit north of that. That got me a pedal.
Well, and I've been amazed at now the upper end prices on mountain bikes. Just we have a good friend here in town that owns a bike shop, and it just his cheap bike's $1,100 now. That's his entry level bikes are $1,100, and I don't think I've ever bought a new bike. I've always gone into the market and picked up a higher end used bike.
I mean, that's really the way to like when so many people that know I cycle and they want to get into it, and they want me questions about this, and I always tell them hey, go in. My bike shop friends probably don't like this, but like go get fitted, and then like, don't buy a Dick's bike. Don't buy a Walmart bike. Don't buy a, you know,
Yeah.
get a legit bike, but you can get one used for, a third of the price of a new, right? And have a really nice bike.
Yeah.
And then if you don't like it, don't ride it. You haven't,
Yeah.
you don't have a Dick's bike on your hand that
Yeah.
you don't need. And you can, anyway. Yeah. Yeah. So what what kind of road bikes do you usually, what are your
What
favorite, what
pardon
kind,
me?
yeah, what brands do you ride? What one
You
actual,
know, again, we bought everything we have now, we bought used. So my my road bike is a Trek Pilot, I think.
mm-hmm.
My wife's road bike is a Felt. That uh, I was doing a supply pastorate in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and I was looking at Craigslist in Nampa or Boise, and I saw this Felt for $200, and
Oh,
I called my wife and said, "Go buy that bike,"
yeah.
and she kind of hemmed and hawed around, and I said, "Listen, the only reason I'm calling you is because I'm in Haiti. If I was there, I'd be showing you the bike. I would have bought it yesterday." So she has this wonderful little Felt road bike. Then from our hybrids, hers is a Trek and mine's a Specialized. Hers is a women's geometry
Mm-hmm.
Trek and mine's a Specialized.
Mm.
Uh, I think we paid 150 or 200 a piece for them,
Wow.
and they do everything we need. We're not in competition, so
Yeah. Yeah. That's great.
they're good little bikes. And then the recumbent tandem is a Rand Screamer.
Yeah. I don't know that world.
Yeah, I picked up off eBay several years ago,
Hmm.
and yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. I've never ridden a recumbent bike.
Yeah, I hadn't either before I bought this one, but it's a different kind of riding.
Yeah. So you guys have, you, you've almost ridden in all 50 states. Tell us about that. You did this trip across coast to coast to coast.
We did
Where,
the coast to coast, and we got home and realized we'd ridden in 26 states, and we thought, well, we ought to just do the rest. And so we've taken a couple of long trips. 2 years ago, we did the Southeast. Last summer, we did the Northeast, and we're sitting at 46
wow.
now.
which,
And
which are the ones you have?
well, the two obvious ones, Alaska and Hawaii.
Hawaii. Okay.
And
Yeah, I've heard the mountain biking in Hawaii is just spectacular.
I imagine it would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to get me over there just a mountain bike.
Yeah.
I haven't ever biked. So Alaska, Hawaii, and where else?
Oddly, Oklahoma and Nevada.
Okay.
So we'll pick them up in the next year or so.
Okay. Okay.
My wife's folks are from Wichita, Kansas.
Your folks?
And yeah, her folks are.
Her folks. Oh, that's where I was born.
And yeah, and so we get back there every year or so, and we'll drop down to Oklahoma and pedal around the car one day.
Yeah. Yeah, I've done big bicycle races in Tulsa.
Okay.
I've done they've changed the name of it, but there was a one of the early 20 some years ago when they first started gravel races. One of friends started this race in Emporia, Kansas, called the Dirty Kanza. And it's a 2-mile gravel road race through the Flint Hills of Kansas.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I jumped on that pretty early on. It grew to end up being thousands of peeps thing, and they ended up having a 50 and 100 and a 200, and I always did 100. And now they've changed. Now a corporation bought the race out, and they call it Unbounded. But and gravel racing's taken off. I mean like Jan Cappy sponsors gravel races now, and huge gravel races all over America now. It's kind of a trendy thing, but I tend to mountain bike and gravel ride because I don't ride on the roads anymore. It just, especially as if I go out by myself, I mean, it's dangerous, people texting, and they just, it's kind of crazy. So if I ride in a group, we can do road pretty safely. You create a bigger presence and everything. But yeah, when you did the coast to coast thing, what did you do? How many miles a day did you do? And you kind of doing this as a ministry trip, right? You were preaching.
Yeah, we did it as a fundraiser for a ministry. We were on the road 72 days. We averaged about 65 a day. Didn't ride on Sundays. We were located in churches on Sundays for services. We rode the Bicentennial Trail from Astoria, Oregon to Virginia.
Mm.
And it goes up through Yellowstone and the Tetons, over Chinook Pass and through Breckenridge. Right, that goes right through Breckenridge. And then out comes out of Colorado, out of Pueblo, and then goes pretty much straight east through Kansas and Missouri, and up and down through Missouri and Kentucky and Virginia, and finally the coast.
What kind of roads? What did you find? What did you find were your favorite? And what were the worst roads? Which one you feel most insecure on? I mean,
yeah, the Bicentennial, which is the group that now they call it Adventure Cycling, I guess is their name now. They originally charted that route in '76 for the Bicentennial. And they did a really good job of there are very few trails. It's almost all highway, but they did a really good job staying away from traffic and staying on secondary back roads. It's all paved. We didn't really have any problems. Probably the biggest challenge was the dogs in Kentucky would chase us down. Those stories are all true about the dogs in Kentucky. And if there was a state that had less of a sense of working with cyclists, it was probably Missouri, southern Missouri. But not really, not really much of a problem. When my wife and I ride now, we ride almost exclusively on rail trails.
Okay.
We stay out of the traffic as much as possible, and just enjoy the ride. And there's the rail trail system is really amazing now. They're everywhere, mostly in the east. It's covered with trails, but that's what we do. We do 20 to 50 miles on rail trail.
Missouri, we've got the Katy Trail, with Kansas City to St. Louis. Right. I have lots of friends that have done that, and
Rocky did that, by the way. Rocky Lamar did that. That.
Serious?
Yeah. And he's not a cyclist.
I would say not.
But he did that.
I didn't know that about Rocky. Huh? Interesting.
Yeah.
Him. Good for him. Yeah.
I don't think he considers it a good memory.
I bet not. It's a painful memory for him, probably. Yeah. I had a friend on my teams who did RAM, actually, and his stories, because he was trying to ride morning, noon, and night without any sleep or rest. It's literally, and he has some pretty graphic description about his butt in the saddle that long. Like even chamois butter didn't help out. I ride.
No, that's but you can't sit on a bike 20 hours a day.
Whew. Yeah. So I've never. The longest I've ever done is that 200-mile gravel road race, and that That's a 13-hour ride for me,
Right.
and that's clipping it pretty, starting at 6 a.m. and I'm
Oh
getting
yeah.
before the sun sets. Really, that's hitting a pretty good pace. But yeah, wow. Well, interesting, fun. So let's talk theology a little bit.
Sure.
If you got a few minutes. So give me. So you've been Nazarene your whole. Before we jump theology, I want to just make a quick plugging in. We appreciate you tuning in to Spirituality Adventure. And if you're not currently on our support team, please consider doing that. Go to spirituality.com, and that's our website. You can jump on there and you can become one of our monthly supporters, and you get special bonus content with that, different content for the different price level. I mean, just for different donation levels and that kind of thing. It's tax deductible gifts, but we do have content as well for our donors and contributors, supporters. So thanks for listening, and jump on there and become one of our supporters. We appreciate it. But yeah, let's talk theology. You've been Nazarene time, and how has your theology developed and changed over 70 years? Or how old are you? 70?
74.
74. Okay. So over 6 or 7 decades, how has your theology developed and changed? And because I did an interview with Tom Ward months ago, specifically on open relational process theology, we did a
Yeah.
whole podcast on that. So, and I actually had a lot of viewers who ended up going out and buying his books, and really found that fascinating, because some of them hadn't really been exposed to that much.
Right.
With the new Calvinist sort of revival that came about with, someone like Tim Ken, just different names that are out there.
Yeah.
You know, um, I think a lot of people from the more conservative event world have probably bumped into, some Calvinist theology, then maybe some form of Arminian theology, but the open and relational and process world is a little different. So I'm just curious your own journey.
Yeah.
How's it
Well,
developed, changed?
um, yeah, I'm the classic church kid. Um, my my act of open rebellion was going to a Baptist church on a Sunday night and not telling my mom. In fact, I think I told my mom we went bowling, which I thought was less sinful than going to a Baptist church
Wow. Wow.
when when I was in high school. And yes, there was a girl involved.
Yeah, of course.
Um,
Oh,
so
how the Baptists grow,
I don't have one of those conversion stories outside the church. Um, but I did grow up in an environment, particularly because of my mom. I grew up in an environment of real genuine appreciation for the spiritual journey of others, whether that was like mine or not. Um, Mom was a traveler. We'd been in the lower 48 states by car by the time I was in eighth grade. Um, and we would always go to worship centers, and it didn't matter what the sign over the door was. Of course, a variety of Protestant churches, Catholic churches, Buddhist temples, mosques. This is back in the 50s and 60s.
Wow. Wow.
And we would always go to those, and we were taught at the level that you would teach a kid, we were taught to be respectful of those places,
Right. That's good.
and how those places represented what was most important to those people.
Mm, mm.
And so that was kind of inbred
Yeah.
in me. Um, I did a psych major in college, which kind of helped me look at stuff from a different direction, even religious experience from a little bit different perspective. Um, was influenced early on, challenged early on. I'm trying to remember the guy's name. Oh no. by a contemporary psychologist at that time, whose name I'll remember in a minute. Um, and kind of opened my mind to think about religious experience in a little bit different way. But then, seminary and graduate school and into the band, all very much in the Wesleyan tradition. If for any listeners who might be Nazarene, they would already know that there's a difference between an Indiana Nazarene and a Southern California Nazarene. And I was a Southern California Nazarene. We were liberal. We weren't, but we were by some standards.
Right.
So I mean, that was my world. Wesleyan theology, holiness tradition, and I think that has just kind of matured over time in terms of reading more stuff, and I really one of the things that's most important to me is that I believe that there is no exceptions. There is no one from whom I can't learn.
Yeah.
Again, no exceptions.
Right.
Everybody knows. Know. And if I'll shut up and listen,
yes,
I'll learn something.
Yes.
I think I have my mom a lot to thank for that. So about 15 years ago or so, I invited Brennan Manning to come to our school to speak.
So just if you never heard of Brennan Manning, you just go pick up Ragamuffin Gospel or any number of books that he's written. Beautiful. I love Brennan because he loves grace and love, right?
Yeah. Brennan came, and one afternoon, Brennan and I were talking, and he asked me if I had ever read any Thomas Merton.
Sweet.
I said no, but I see him quoted everywhere.
Right.
And he said, and I don't want this to sound arrogant at all, but because it's not, but he said I don't recommend him to everybody, but he said I think you might get it. He might connect with you. And about a month later, I was in a used bookstore and picked up his autobiography, his early years, and that started me on a journey. I now own all 74 books.
Wow.
Thank you, eBay.
Wow. So which of Thomas Merton's?
Yeah.
So which to pick one or two or three for our audience to what would you suggest for Thomas Merton?
I always say that a good place to start with Merton is a book called New Seeds of Contemplation.
Okay, I've read that one.
Which is a series of essays. They're not all linked to one another. You can kind of jump in where you want.
Yeah.
One of the most significant books for me, and probably because of my Wesleyan holiness background, has I'm looking at my Merton collection, trying to remember the title of this book that's been most influential in my life that I can't think of right now. The title is Life and Holiness.
That one,
which is, to my mind, the best book on holiness theology that I've ever read.
Thomas Merton.
Yeah.
Wow.
Interesting. And so
I got to write that down.
Yeah,
Life and
Merton,
happiness.
Merton has been I don't want to leave the impression that I've read all 70 of his books. I'm probably 30 into the library. Um, but it's come to the place where sometimes I'm not sure where Merton ends and Gene begins,
Hmm.
and I'm okay with that. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's been very, very influential in how I've grown and where I've come to.
Very good.
Um,
Good.
so
Richard Rohr. I can't remember if I told you.
yes,
We might have been offline, but when I was at my darkest in 2000, feeling like an atheist, even though I'm a voracious reader and studier my whole life, I wasn't even reading. I was just kind of dead spiritually. And a friend sent me Richard Rohr's book, Falling Upward, and was a big fan of Thomas Merton's.
yes,
Um, and Richard has a book on the true self. I can't remember the immortal
yeah,
maybe is the title of it, with the true self. And so he flips back to Merton, Seeds of
yes,
Contemplation book, and that's what led me to that book.
yes,
Of course, I had, was it his 7-Story Mountain?
yes.
That
That's
years
the
ago,
first book that I read was Seven Story
the
Mountain.
first one of his that I read too. But yeah, so interesting. So um, yourself in Tom Ward's camp of open and theology. Is that then you would subscribe to? Have you read his books or just
Yeah, I've read a few of them,
okay?
and of course Tom and I still meet for coffee every now and then.
Nice.
Um, and we kind of get to the same place on a different road than each other.
Describe that to me.
Well, where the thesis of Tom. Have you read God Can't?
I read God Can't. I read Open
Okay,
Relational Theology.
so
I read,
this idea that where Tom would struggle with words like almighty and all powerful and able to do anything, hence the title.
yeah.
Uh, Tom would see those. I'll use the word limitations, and I understand that's a loaded word for some. Uh, Tom would see those limitations as inherent in God's nature, and I would probably see those limitations as a consequence of God's choices.
Hmm.
And we both come out in the same place,
Yeah.
pretty much.
Yeah.
Uh, and and uh, and I'm also very aware that Tom might be right about that. And once he even told me he thought I might be, though he would deny that. But I think this his real contribution from my perspective. He tackles who is the guy that years ago wrote why bad things happen to good people, a Jewish rabbi.
Kushner.
Yes, Kushner. Yeah.
Mhm.
Kushner said once that the only religious question that matters is the question of suffering. And I think he's right.
I do too.
I think he's right. And Tom courageously goes down a path that not very many other people have been willing to go down
Right.
in response to that question.
I mean, Buddhism really circulates around that. Totally.
Yes, it does.
You know?
Yeah, very much.
Yeah.
Very much. I mean, my understanding of Buddhism is limited, and some of it comes from Buddhism, by the way. But the idea that suffering is the distance between what you expected and what you experienced,
Mm.
it is has been very helpful to me and so Yeah, I think one of Tom's real contributions is the relational aspect. Um,
Um,
as Tom has pointed out, and I incidentally, I should full disclosure, I listened to your podcast with Tom yesterday.
oh, nice.
The uh, the notion that God is untouchable, unchangeable, unemotional, that God is very Greek, very Zeus-like,
Yeah,
is a tragic misunderstanding of the biblical image of God.
agree. Agree.
Who
Yeah.
seems to, in the Old Testament, seems to be able to be talked into things and talked out of things.
Right.
Um, you can almost hear him slapping himself in the forehead and saying, "Shoot, I hadn't thought of that."
Yeah.
That may be a loose paraphrase, but
Yeah. Like instead of, oh my God, it's like, oh myself.
yeah, yeah. When Moses says, "You don't want to do that, that's going to ruin your reputation with Egypt." Oh, you, you know, and um, so I think that's real significant contributions. And then anybody that has pastored for any amount of time has been in the room with that person who says, "Where was God when I was abused?"
Yeah.
You ever been there?
Yeah.
How many times?
Yeah.
Yeah, many. And and Tom answers that question in a way that has been redemptive to a lot of people.
I agree.
And so, he we 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 probably disagree around the fringes on
Mm,
some things,
yeah.
but uh, I I think I would say, and the word might get out that I said it, that Tom's one of the most Christian Christians I know.
Nice.
And if the theology is outside the lines now and then, um,
Well, it's definitely where I've landed for sure after all that I've gone through. Um, and yeah, I've had to definitely rethink my concepts of God. Um, and he's been helpful along with a few others too. I've actually gone back and reread my process guys,
yeah, yeah,
Um, and if you think about like where like your college, if you think about the students that you've been a chat to over, no 2.5 decades. Um, I'm sure like if you thought about what were the 3 or 4 most persistent difficult that they wrestled with, if you had to pick 2 or 3 or 4,
yeah, yeah.
what would those be? And then how I think I'm just curious, what would those be? And then in in some, I think the type of theology you're describing sometimes can help save some of those students and those questions in terms of a faith perspective.
Yeah, yeah.
Save might be too strong of a word, but them navigate.
Well, no, I don't think it's too strong a word. Some names come to mind that it applies to probably. Um, I think the first thing is kind of a universal experience that we all grow up thinking our experience is like everybody else's experience. And so if you grow up Nazarene, you have this picture of how that all fits together. And if you grow up Southern Baptist, you have this picture of how all that fits together. And then in my experience, because I was chaplain at a Christian college. Now I will say that NNU is a non-confessional college, so we have non-Christian students. Um, but you as an 18-year-old who's grown up in a particular tradition, you come to this Christian college and you wind up with Catholic or Lutheran or Mormon roommate, and they talk about God in a whole different way than you're used to. And you, this is probably overly simplified, but if what I thought about, so the crisis is, if what I thought about God is not the way everybody thinks about God, then maybe God's not what I thought about God. Therefore, maybe there isn't a God. And so you kind of go through this, what we call deconstruction, which I think is a path everybody has to walk down. And I think one of the crises in the evangelical church is that there are too many grown-ups, old folks, who never walked that path. And you know, and after a certain age, you can't walk that path. You just have to defend your path.
Yeah.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
100%.
So I think that's probably number one, is students navigating this new vocabulary, new way of understanding God and God's relationship with us. And a lot of that, 18 to 20-year-olds, a lot of that was coming to school with the idea that God had a wonderful plan for their lives. Footnote,
Yeah, right.
And they understood that in a way that it never should have been understood. They understood it as a job and a spouse and a house, you know. And honestly, one of the recurring crises of a chaplain for 23 years is the kid who was sure that was God's girl for him, and she him and started going out with somebody else.
Oh, and the
Stops,
right? Yeah.
And so it was, how do I sort out what I've been told about God's plan for my life? When I knew I was supposed to be a doctor, but I flunked organic chemistry. And, why doesn't the professor understand this is what God wants me to do? And so why did she not pass me?
Right.
Those are the kind of questions that
Yeah.
it's sorting out that whole notion that I think is caused by kind of from teaching to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I fell apart at 57, 58, deconstructed, and then, and of course, I was working on a second doctorate in the Hebrew. I was chapters into my dissertation on that, but it fell apart for me, really. It really did, and I think because I looked on, this sort of like, it almost felt like God had set me up for it. If you looked back into the people that God put into my life, then the way that played out in my moment and the way some of that fell apart almost felt like a divine setup. And emotionally, this is how it felt.
Yeah.
Fell apart emotionally, right? Intellectually, I could have argued, I helped thousands of people through darkness, but when I hit it and I didn't even want to live anymore, it just unraveled a whole different way, I wasn't 22 going through this. I was 57, 58 with lots of degrees and lots of experience, and still and then have had to rebuild a concept, which Tom's, the kind of work you're talking about, that comes out of deep crisis. I mean, it's like Jürgen Moltmann's book, By God, coming out of the depths of the Holocaust.
Yes.
How do you get out of that? Or into that, out of it, or responsible for it. You just think about the darkest kind of suffering that this planet, people in the planet, go through. How do you come up with a guy who's in that?
Yeah.
You can believe in, that's not a monster.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I think Tom's work, um, the- it 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 really helps. It really helps with that. But I also understand how it makes some people really nervous.
I understand too.
Um, he,
All my
you know,
Calvinist friends get super nervous.
yeah, yeah. You know, I mean, the phrase "but God's in control." You know that phrase that we have used to just prop ourselves up emotionally.
Yeah.
You know? And I, I've shared with others and with students that are kind of stuck there. That as I read the Old Testament, the the Old Testament is a very long story of God repeatedly not getting God's way. You know, it over and over and over and over and over. It doesn't go the way God wanted it to go. Why do we now say, you know, God pulls the strings? He clearly wasn't pulling the strings in the Testament.
Yeah.
Um, so you know, I, I, you know, to paraphrase Forrest Gump, stuff,
Yeah. Right. Ah,
and and sometimes
I say that too, but anyway.
Western evangelical folk have a hard time with that.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Um,
I, the thing I pulled, I might have mentioned this in my interview with Tom, but uh, Heschel, Abraham Joshua Heschel.
yeah, yeah, you did, yeah,
I love Heschel, and he wrote this book on the prophets.
right.
There's a chapter in there.
It's right over there.
Nice.
On my shelf.
And if you want to get into that issue from the Hebrew mindset, I think Heschel does an incredible job. Chapters on the pathos of God.
Yeah, yeah,
Unpacking the the problem of having the Greek perfection categories imposed upon God
right.
versus this Hebraic concept of God, which I think works out better. Study it
Yeah,
deep.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, wow. Well, we could talk for hours. Good stuff. Good stuff, Gene. Thanks for your willingness to do the podcast, and I would love to stay in touch. Tom, I could get out to OrtCon this July, but I'm speaking at an audio feed conference in July, and maybe at this conference called Wild Goose Festival in July, and in Chicago. I mean, audio feeds in Chicago, Wild Goose in North Carolina. I'm not sure I can go Idaho to
Yeah, yeah,
Chicago to deal, but I would love to come if I could get there a little earlier, stay a little late. It'd be fun to hang out with you guys in person.
yeah. Well, we'll be in Wichita in May.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah,
Well, if you're ever in Kansas City again, you've got my cell phone
yeah.
now.
When Joe and Rocky moved, we kind of lost our
Our,
reason to go to Kansas City,
all right.
but
Yeah. Well, um, thanks so much. And I'm curious. Sometimes when I interview people, they have a website or a books or this or that or the other. Let's just say somebody wants to get a hold of you. How would they do that? Is there a website or a email or anything?
there's a Facebook. I'm on Facebook.
Okay.
At my age, I'm on Facebook regularly.
Okay.
I know it ain't cool anymore, but
And they
that's
just
where
get there through Gene Schandorff,
yeah, through Gene Schandorff.
which is Schandorf.
One N, yeah, Schandorff, two F's.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
check him out on Facebook.
And I pretty much that's where I am now. I'm not there. On, a younger friend taught me how to use Instagram, and I forgot. So I have a page, but I'm not there.
Right. Well, that's why Matt's here with me in this pod, my producer. So he keeps me on. At least
Yeah,
he helps
yeah,
the best he can. Anyway,
yeah.
I'm
What?
you know what?
Can I throw one more thing at you? Do I have time for one other thought on my own personal theology?
Sure.
Um, I, Eric Fromm is the psychologist whose name I couldn't think of
Yeah.
a while ago. And Fromm has always been a real challenge to me and an encouragement. Um, but coming out of college and entering into ministry, I had about a 10-year battle with the idea of God itself. And I was the guy that was pastoring a church and not sure whether there was a God or not. I I got Jesus 100%, and so I just preached Jesus, you
Right.
know.
Exactly.
And I never said anything I didn't believe, but there was a point in time that I just came to this. I got to get this one figured out, and I had a moment that I have never shared and won't now. By the way, but and the reason for that is it wouldn't mean anything to anybody. If I said this is how I know there's a God, it changed the world for me. Wouldn't mean anything to anybody else. Wouldn't prove a thing to anybody.
Right.
But I tell that story just to say that even without the more visible roller coaster that you and many others have been on,
Mm.
a church kid like me's had to go through some of that too.
Yeah.
Where am I leading these people on every Sunday? It is this is a great story. I wonder if it's real.
Yeah. Right.
And I, in what I would consider the faithfulness of God, he spoke to this kid in a language that this kid would understand. And that question went away and has never come back again.
Hmm.
In its place, there have been lots of other questions,
Right. Right.
but not that one.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Sometimes just better questions, even.
yeah,
Um. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that because I do think pastors suffering times about around some of these issues because
yeah, yeah,
you don't feel the freedom to be totally brutally honest and fall apart in front of your congregation.
yeah,
It's really hard, like like to just stepped out and guys, I don't even know if I believe in any of this or not. No. It's just all one big myth. At least it's a great myth. It's a
yeah,
cool myth.
yeah,
It's a myth. It's a myth this has run 2,000 years or so. The early books to
yeah.
and
And one of my favorite lines from Merton, and I wish I could tell you where it came from. I read it out of one of his books. Uh, he said, "We will all live our lives as if something were true."
mm,
Either it will be scripture,
mm-hmm,
or it will be the news,
mm-hmm,
or it will be the guy at the coffee shop. You know, but we will all live our lives as if something is true,
yeah,
and we won't ever know for sure.
yeah,
And and this and I've chosen to live my life as if this were true
mm-hmm, yeah,
in the spirit of Merton.
yeah, yeah. Beautiful. It's beautiful. Yeah, well, our brains take all this information and create narratives and uh, that help us navigate the world. And it's true. We have to, just to navigate life. We have to
Yeah,
some kind of guidance system that helps us with that. So
yeah, yeah.
beautiful. Well, thank you, Gene. Appreciate it, man.
Thank you for the chance to meet you and
Yeah.
spend some time.
wish I could ride with you. Just that's always fun, just to get out and spin and talk. I do that
Yes.
every week with buddies.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm out. So I just rode Sunday, and I'm not in great shape right now, coming through the winter, and we've had a difficult winter to ride through, and we did about a 60-mile ride, and I was riding with somebody who's a lot, and about three other guys, and I had preached all morning, had a council meeting after church, then jumped on my bike at 2 o'clock Sunday without with a latte on my belly. Calories. I was probably already dehydrated, and I got out crushing it with these guys. And about 2 hours in, I'm bonking and starting to cramp, and I go far away. The last hour and a half of the ride was just miserable. I hadn't bonked and cramped that bad in a long time, and I was like going, "Dang it, man!" And it was all because I just didn't fuel and hydrate well enough before the ride, And I was like, you'd think you'd learn how not to bonk as many as I've ridden. I've had years where I rode 10,000 miles in a year on my bike. Yeah. But at any rate.
Well, the first ride of the spring is always an interesting.
Yeah, especially the first long one, the first last one, that kind of thing. Yeah. All right. Well, hey, take care. Thanks for doing this. Thanks everybody for tuning in to Spirituality Adventures, and see you next time.
All righty. Good to be with you.
This concludes today's episode. Thanks for tuning in and listening. Remember, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Remember to like, share, or subscribe to the social media platform that you're using. And then go to our website, spiritualityadventures.com, and make a one-time donation, or you can subscribe monthly and receive our special bonus content. Thanks so much.